The next session is the session 3 on the status of food fortification in Africa. And we will have 2 subsections here. The first one will look at the mapping the trend and challenges and opportunity of food fortification on the continent. And this first part of the session will be moderated by Dr. Onyango. I hope Dr. Onyango is here with us. Dr. Onyango?
Yes,
okay.
She is here.
Thank you, Dr. Onyango, who will moderate this session, is a nutrition advisor at the regional office of the World Health Organization. She has been with this institution for more than 16 years and was appointed director of the Universal Health Coverage Healthcare Population Group in April 2021. Dr. Onyango, you have the floor. Please kindly invite the speakers to keep time because we are already 15 minutes behind time. Thank you. You have the floor, Dr. Onyango.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Simplice. And I'm very privileged to moderate this session. I'm going to, I have 3 speakers lined up, and the session is on the state of food fortification in Africa, the mapping, trends, challenges, and opportunities at the continental level. So I understand that some speakers have requested to share their own slides, but that the host team also has the slides. So in order not to lose too much time, I think if there has already been an indication of which speakers want to set up their slides, they will be, as I introduce them, they will be setting up their slides. And something that I didn't get the full bios of the speakers. Maybe I should have gotten it somewhere, but I didn't look in the right place. So actually that saves us time. What I will do is introduce each speaker and then request them to tell us about themselves, because nobody can tell our story as well as we do. So this is a good opportunity for them to tell their story. So the first speaker who is going to address food fortification in Africa, what is the current state, is Dr. Mandana Arabi, Vice President, Global Technical Services at Nutrition International. It's a great pleasure to invite you to speak, Dr. Arabi. Over to you. I hope you're with us.
Yes, hi, thank you. Thanks for having me, and thanks to the organizers and to our moderator for this session. I will be able to share my slides, so I think that would make it easier to move forward if that's okay. I'm guessing that's fine. Can you see them? Yes. Okay.
Yes, we can see the slide.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. And a little bit of bio on myself. So I'm currently Vice President of the Global Technical Services and Chief Technical Advisor at Nutrition International. I'm a physician by training. I'm from Iran, and I also trained in international nutrition. I actually started my career in my country in fortification programs, starting saltization, the National Saltization Program as a research advisor there, and also fortification of flour with iron and folate at the time when I started working there. And I feel that this community has been coming a long way, at least in the course of my career, and happy to have been participating as part of the global nutrition community in addressing fortification issues as part of the broader mix of important nutrition interventions that all are needed to go together to really allow us to improve the situation of the populations in need in an optimal way. With that, I'd like to move ahead with my slides, and my focus is going to be on food fortification in Africa, where we stand. As colleagues talked about anemia and the needs and the fact that fortification is one of the interventions that should be highly valued. I'll be talking about a status of fortification legislation specifically and trends, comparing anemia status and fortification of staples, kind of trying to see whether we can already show some trends and relationships between these two, current coverage and compliance, and some key considerations for future. Talking about the status of fortification, we wanted to highlight a few key staples here and just see how far we've come. Wheat flour in 2000, up to 2000, only one country had mandatory fortification. Now we are up to 31, either mandatory or voluntary. Wheat flour from 2, now we are at 11 again, mandatory or voluntary, and then 10 mandatory. Oil, we had 1, now 22, either mandatory or voluntary, and 18 mandatory. So as you see, we've made progress across the board, and then some relatively newer staples, such as rice, are still not legislated in any country in the region, but there could be a few early adopters from West Africa, including our host, Cote d'Ivoire, as well as Senegal. I will not focus too much on anemia prevalence. I noticed that other colleagues before me have spoken about this, that it is still a prominent public health issue, that several countries across Africa have to be dealing with anemia, recognizing that, of course, all the causes are not nutritional. It's a mix of different causes, but nutritional anemia also is one of the key contributors to these numbers. And just one thing I would like to highlight and move to the next slide is that we actually see that while many of these countries have come to scale with their fortification, 10 countries have less than 75% coverage of fortified food vehicles. So there is still work to be done to get better coverage, as well as in areas where these programs have started and have coverage, to improve the quality and have enforcement and accountability with a higher level. I also wanted to highlight where we are in another fortification effort, salt iodization, and then the situation of iodine deficiency disorders. And again, as you see, while there has been progress, several countries have now are showing adequate iodine intake. Still, 7 countries have insufficient iodine.
Excuse me, please. Christiane, could you kindly mute your microphone? Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
That's fine. Yeah, and then another thing to highlight in this slide is that, as you see, out of these 7 countries, 6 do have mandatory legislation. So just something to highlight that, while I'm focusing on talking about the legislation, the importance of governance and accountability frameworks, having the legislation alone is not enough. So, there is also really important, there needs to be focused on implementation and the quality and the compliance as well. In terms of regional commitment and leadership, again, really important to highlight some key contributors to the progress so far. This kind of commitment helps receive political buy-in and backing for national efforts. So really important, and advocacy has always been a key element in fortification success. It provides countries with a strong starting point for their own national programs. And also, as Africa experiences in general, a rising trend in economic growth and emerging common markets, increasingly regional bodies are harmonizing these fortification standards, and they're important because it will affect the countries that are engaging with each other. So some of these initiatives that we wanted to highlight: the Economic Community of West African States, significant progress over the past 15 years, complemented by national level action. There have been some resolutions such as the universal salt iodization, mandatory fortification of vegetable oil and wheat flour, and harmonized regional fortification standards are in place. And while these show as bullets in presentations, we all know and have experienced just how challenging these efforts are and how important these successes are. And really, congratulations to those involved, and hoping that we will continue learning from these lessons and supporting these kinds of initiatives for improving the fortification efforts. For the East Central and South African development community, we could mention the common fortification standards that have been developed. And then for Southern Africa development community, new initiatives are on their way, such as the minimum standards for food fortification. I also wanted to just highlight what we have in terms of most recent data, and the source here is the Global Fortification Data Exchange, which is a great way for us to have access to the latest and a common way for us to talk about what the situation is and the progress. But here, for example, as you see, 3 out of 20 countries with mandatory fortification with flour have population coverage data of the fortified food. Again, similarly, only 3 out of 18 countries with mandatory fortification of oil have population coverage data in the global database. For salts, the situation is better. We know that coverage for salt iodization, it can be captured in surveys like DHS, and I think that has been a great contributor to having data available on salt. And hopefully we will find ways to have better data available on other fortification activities as well. Speaking of compliance, also wanted to talk about, one way that we can look at kind of a proxy for what's happening with the compliance is percentage of food that's fortified in Africa. And as you see, for wheat flour, it's a range. It's anywhere between 10 to 100%, and 60% of countries have more than 90%, according to what data that's available. Again, there's a range for maize flour, there's a range with oil, and similarly with salt. And generally, it seems that countries do have data available on percentage of food that's fortified. However, as we spoke in terms of the data challenges, I think this also highlights that perhaps as a proxy, it's a good, it's not the best way basically because of the big ranges that you see to know exactly what's happening to the consumers, and especially what parts of the consumer groups, especially those with lower socioeconomic and higher needs, perhaps may not be receiving the percentage of the food that's fortified. So as we all noted, this lack of or less available data on the situation and coverage of fortification is a really big challenge. My final slide, few key considerations I wanted to bring up. First one I just mentioned, inadequate and low quality data on coverage and compliance. And we are all committed. Nutrition International has been working in the countries that we have a presence, but also happy to be part of global initiatives that try to address this issue. We wanted to highlight the potential of fortifying new food vehicles, especially rice in Africa. Right now, for example, again, Nutrition International has been collaborating with WFP. We've been doing cost effectiveness analysis on rice fortification in West Africa. And I think these are the kinds of efforts that will allow us to start a momentum for new food vehicle fortifications. We also want to highlight, as other colleagues like Dr. Namakola and others mentioned, fortification is not the panacea, it's part of an optimal mix of interventions. And that's the approach for supporting programming, and hopefully we will have a better way of harmonizing our programming efforts so that this optimal mix approach in countries will be enforced, and fortification is seen as one of the key interventions within a mix of interventions that can have a significant impact. Highlighting also regional coordination and harmonization, that's as I noted, has already significantly contributed to progress. We are also exploring sub-regional groups that can be based for sharing learnings and supporting each other in improving fortification, especially the standards, the governance, and compliance. We want to highlight the importance of global and regional accountability for food fortification. And just as an example, recently we co-hosted a webinar on governance and accountability in food fortification with the area community of practice and the World Health Organization. So it's really good that there was also good participation. Several of the esteemed speakers from this conference also were part of that. And it was the first step in a way for us to bring momentum to really enforce and coming together, talking about what is needed in the governance and accountability from the global community, and also how we can help countries improve these areas of governance and compliance and legislation and quality control at the country level. And finally, continuous review of landscape for adjustments to fortification design and programming is something that my organization is committed to. We feel that nutrition is a very dynamic field, and we are committed to providing technical assistance and support to make sure that countries are benefiting from the latest programs that are meeting their needs. Also talking about, again, colleagues spoke about the COVID situation. I think that this is the time to be able to be flexible and to have designs that are responsive to the changing environments. Thank you very much for your time, and happy to answer questions later in the session. Back to our esteemed moderator, Dr. Anya.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Arabi, for a very comprehensive discussion on our fortification situation. Where are we? The challenges that we face. Yes, there is progress on legislation, but legislation doesn't help if it's not implemented with high quality and the coverage which we don't know much about because we don't have data. So thank you very much. Now we go to our second speaker, Dr. Amadou Lamine Gay, from the Regional Food Fortification Manager at Helen Keller International. And he's going to tell us a little bit about food fortification in Africa. But before then, he will tell us about himself. Dr. Lamine Gay, you have the floor.
Thanks, Dr. Anyango. It's a pleasure for me to take part to this important consultation organized by SEPTEMBRE under the leadership of World Food Program. Before starting, I just want to introduce myself by saying that I am a nutritionist by training, and I hold over 12 years of professional experience in international nutrition and health program in developing countries. Currently, since 2019, I'm the Helen Keller International Regional Food Fortification Program Manager, and I'm providing strategic leadership to Helen Keller Food Fortification Initiative in Africa, including policy dialogues and research on the potential to fortify bouillon in the West African region. Let's start with my presentation now. I will share on presentation mode. Okay, so I will be sharing two.
We're seeing your cue. Could you remove the queued slide? Somebody in the, I think you need to do the display settings and change.
What is the problem?
On the display, we're seeing your queued slide. We're seeing the second slide.
Okay, so
and that's queued for the next. So you need to change the display settings.
Okay, so give
on
me some.
The
Okay.
No. We are now sharing something else. If you go to, go to slideshow.
Yeah.
Hit the slideshow on your, now we have your presentation, but not in presentation mode.
Okay, so let me put it in presentation mode.
Yes.
Give me a minute. Okay. Is it okay now?
Yes, but we are still seeing your second. Okay, so you see on top of your main slide, if you do, there's a display settings. Go move to the left on this screen.
Is it working?
Can somebody in
May I ask to the organizer to share the slide?
Yes, let us keep it on this. Let us change, Dr. Gay, just so that we can help you on that. Okay.
Okay. So let me. I'm using two screen. Let me.
That's better. This is better.
Okay, good. I was using two screen, so I disconnected to the second one. Is it working now?
Unfortunately not. This is better. This is good now. This is good. Please go ahead, Dr. Gee.
Okay. I have some challenging, still having some challenging now. So may I ask to the organizer to share my screen, to share the presentation?
Yeah, we can. We have a presentation. I thought it was from you. I think it's been shared by the host. Please go ahead now. Can you see it?
Yes, we are displaying Dr. Nyong'o. So now, can we move, Dr. Gay? Can we go for the following slides?
He probably can't see if that's a problem.
Okay, you are sharing my screen.
Yes. No.
No,
You
no.
had a slide, Fortify West Africa Project 2011-2016. You can speak about that. Please go ahead.
Okay. So thank you very much. So sorry for this technical issue. So I will start with this presentation. This slide are about some food fortification initiative that are implemented by Ellen Cullen International in West African region. And the first one is about Fortified West Africa, which has been completed, while the second one relates to Buoyant Initiative is still ongoing. So the Fortify West Africa project was implementing from 2011 to 2017 with funding from USAID. And the project was conducted in ECOWAS region with the support of multiple partners, including ECOWAS, Human Commission, WAHO, government donors, private sector, academia, consumers association, NGOs. The intervention key objectives were to develop and harmonize fortification standards across the 15 ECOWAS countries to encourage intra-regional trade, and also to advocate government in West African region to mandate fortification of locally produced and imported wheat flour and cooking oils, and to build the capacity of national institutions for monitoring and quality control of this fortified food. Slide. In terms of achievement, regionally harmonized standards for wheat flour and cooking oil were ratified in ECOWAS countries. And also almost all the 15 ECOWAS countries mandated wheat flour and cooking oil fortification, has shown on these two maps for fortification of vegetable oils in red and mandatory fortification of wheat flour in green. The project provides support to government to strengthen a quality control system. And based on coverage survey, 91% and 86% of the target population in West Africa had access to fortified wheat flour and fortified cooking oils respectively. Slide. In terms of key success of success for this project, we can say that the government's commitment through the establishment of national food for alliances for food fortification has contributed to coordination of food fortification activity with all the stakeholders, including the Minister of Trade, the Minister of Industry, the Ministry of Health, the cooking oil producers, regulatory agency, civil society, and partners, in adoption of legislation for mandatory of wheat flour and cooking oil. And at the regional level, UMOA, WAHO, and ECOWAS played a critical role to coordinate efforts on food fortification, and especially to advance harmonized regional fortification standards and regulatory framework. Strong advocacy for countries to update national laws to reflect the harmonized standards and to harmonize the enriched fortification logo that has been used to promote the use of fortified food among population. One of the main elements of success is the strong engagement of the regional oil producers and millers association to ensure that any oil or producers or millers in the region is engaged on fortification. Slide. Despite this success, I mentioned through the Fortify West Africa. Despite this success, I said, food fortification has not yet met its potential for impact in the West African region. Thus, all the food vehicles, including rice and bouillon, has been considered to give us additional opportunities to improve the coverage of food fortification in the region. Bouillon cubes are widely consumed, particularly in West Africa, due to its widespread use, and also bouillon are being considered as a potential food fortification to deliver micronutrients for vulnerable population, including women and children. This slide is describing the bouillon fortification project, which is currently implemented by ALIMENTS International in Burkina Faso, Niger, and Senegal. The project is funded by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The key approach include the establishment of multi-stakeholders country working groups to coordinate the activities in the target countries. We will also generate and advocate for use of evidence to inform government decision on bouillon fortification in target countries. The project will also promote advocacy, stronger coordination, and consensus building among national and regional actors in support of food fortification, while facilitating development and harmonization of standards for bouillon at national and regional level. Currently, only Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Niger, and Senegal has adopted standard for bouillon manufacturing at country level. Slide. For the implementation of this project, we are facing some challenging, which are being addressed through the implementation of the activity. To achieve the objective of this project, there is a need to address some challenging, as I said, including the acceptance of bouillon as fortification vehicle due to its potential contribution to non-communicable disease like hypertension. There is also a lack of data on total sodium and contribution of bouillon to sodium and monosodium glutamate intakes. These concerns are being addressed through formative research that has been conducted in the 3 countries, in Burkina Faso, Niger, and Senegal, and also in collaboration with Iodine Global Network. The contribution of bouillon and other processed food to sodium intakes in Burkina Faso, Niger, and Senegal has been conducted, and we have disseminated the findings through policy brief. Currently, urinary sodium excretion survey is in preparation to address concerns related to sodium intakes and contribution of bouillon to these intakes. We are also currently collaborating with other partners, including UC Davis and CSIRO and RISE, to conduct work in order to establish the impact of fortified bouillon on micronutrient status in Ghana. Also, we will develop a model for combination of large-scale food fortification, which will be contribute to reduce the micronutrient inadequacy of population, and also develop technology for salt reduction in bouillon, as well as increase its micronutrient content. Thanks, and I will be happy to have your question after this presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gay, for sharing with us the experience on the work that you're doing with Helen Keller International in West Africa, the bouillon cube. I think that's an important subject for discussion in the light of what you've already pointed out, the fact that this needs to be balanced with the measures on controlling NCDs that are linked with salt consumption. I think also there is the question that needs to be asked, what are the bouillon cubes being added to? Because when you think in terms of the holistic systemic changes in food systems so that foods are, we promote the consumption of diversified foods. We need to know what are these bouillon cubes being added to. So I'm sure there are going to be questions. There was already one that we have received, but we will move on to now to our third speaker, Ms. Poncho Sepolan. I hope I pronounced that correctly, Poncho, and who is from the South African Southern African Development Community, and the SADC is a critical regional economic community and partner in all issues related to food and food fortification. I think Poncho has a personal commitment in this area, personal involvement in this, and it's very good to segue to your contribution, because we've heard from the what our civil society partners can do. And now, please, the time is for you to speak to us. Tell us a little bit about yourself before you start, and then we will be very keen to listen to what you have to share from the study. Over to you, Poncho.
Good afternoon, good morning to everyone. My name is Poncho. Just to check, are you able to see my slides?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a privilege and honor for us as SADC Secretariat to be invited to this high-level meeting. Just to give you a brief of my background, I'm trained as a nutritionist, and the journey in nutrition started in 2001. So I've evolved in the government sector. I've worked there for close to 15 years in government, then transited to the UN agencies, and then working in the regional economic community, which is SADC, since 2018. And my role is to coordinate nutrition programs within the SADC region. And indeed, we've also made strides in the fortification agenda, and we'll share with you some of the developments. I thank you. So with regards, just to give you a snapshot, at SADC, we have made a commitment to address and reduce all forms of malnutrition. Within our regional food and nutrition strategy, we have really outlined how we want to reduce stunting, but in particular of concern is micronutrient deficiencies, which we are saying food fortification is one of the interventions. And we'll also share with you some of the interventions we've embarked on as complementary activities to increasing dietary diversity in the region. In particular, micronutrients deficiencies that we are mostly prevalent in the region, like other speakers have indicated, includes iron deficiency, anemia, vitamin A deficiency, zinc, iodine, and folic acid or folate deficiency. So now, just to give a snapshot, one of the speakers has given you sort of the landscape of fortification, mandatory fortification in the region or in Africa. Just to zoom into, I'm not sure if you can see my slide properly because it shows some control panels. Just to show you where we are as SADC in terms of mandatory maize and wheat flour fortification. Currently, only 6 out of the 16 member states have mandatory food fortification of staple cereals, whilst others are doing voluntary food fortification, which for us is still a concern, knowing the cost effectiveness of food fortification programs. And when you look at fats and oils, we have only 5 member states that have mandatory food fortification for oil and fats, with 1 having voluntary food fortification. Just to sum it up in terms of fortification, only 10, about 10 of the member states don't have in place mandatory food fortification for staples, and particularly 1 member state, which is Zambia, they are fortifying sugar. And one of the other initiatives that we're seeing is that we have more countries showing interest, particularly Mauritius and Botswana, who are trying to align to the regional standards. And I'll unpack the process we took in developing the regional minimum standards for food fortification. Some of the developments or achievements is that within the region, salt is the most prevalent commodity, condiment that is fortified, iodized, and we have about 13 member states having universal salt iodization programs. And these are some of the lessons you might want to know. How did we get it right? But also, with that being said, the issue of population coverage is still something that we don't know much about. But in the earlier presentation, it was articulated well that there is sort of a thorough coverage of salt iodization regionally and continentally, which is encouraging. So in terms of the ongoing efforts within the region that I will share with you.
Sorry, Ponso, may I
Yes.
please request you to pause because several participants are not able to see your slide.
Okay, but are you able to see it?
I can see it, but I've seen several comments of colleagues that cannot see the slide. So
Okay.
the leads, the hosts, can you help us?
Or do I stop?
Adelaide, I think it's a connectivity problem on the side of the people who are not seeing the slides.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Dr. Onyango, because here for us, we have it projected. Maybe one of the question was that it was a bit inside the content was small to see and to read. But just for all participants, we will make all presentations available. So yes, and maybe that was the main issue. Please continue.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry about that. And from my end, I see the headings are not showing properly, but I hope you can see the heading for each of the slides. Some of the ongoing initiative within the region, well, the momentum for food fortification started with in 2018, when we held a regional workshop on quality assurance and quality control. We had a total of 16 member states, 15 member states present, representation from development partners, food industry. It was a huge occasion in 2018. And from that meeting, it was agreed that as a region, we needed to come up with a food fortification roadmap. And in that roadmap, we identified member state support needs. And what was of particular importance, that's the platform or the initiative that we took in coming up with a regional food fortification partners platform. This partner platform has been a very critical platform to forge forward food fortification in the region. And this was important because within the Sodec Secretariat, you only have one individual coordinating nutrition. However, the involvement of partners made sure that they will, because of their presence in the member states, they will be able to support and provide technical support. And over time, between 2018 to date, we've seen member states being supported on the development of legislation or strategies, food fortification advocacy, support on monitoring and enforcement, capacity building on quality assurance and quality control. Something that is still a challenge has been on consumption and micronutrient data analysis, which is still a challenge, but we have the likes of UNICEF, WFP supporting some of the member states. In the next slide, I'll just unpack how, as we did the roadmap, we categorized our countries so that then on a quarterly basis, as partners, we meet regionally to see progress towards support on the four areas. And I must say, there's been impressive progress. And some of this progress are seen around the advocacy piece, where we've seen Mauritius, for example, Minister of Health being the lead in advocating and supporting the food fortification agenda. And when it comes to strategies, we've seen again in Mauritius and Botswana, the initiative starting to gain momentum, but also Namibia, Zimbabwe, showing interest to even align to the regional standards, just to highlight some of the few. And the important partners that have been with us throughout the journey has been Food Fortification Initiative, GAIN, UNICEF, IGN, WFP, XHC, FAO. We've had partnership in terms of donor funding from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and USAID and the EU. So now zooming into the minimum standards for food fortification, just to also highlight to the participants, these standards were officially approved by ministers in 2020. We presented them to the ministers and we highlighted that the reasons we came up with the fortification standards for the region was to help come up with specified minimum targets for micronutrient levels that would align to the consumption data that we looked at in the region. But also what was key was to facilitate inter-regional trade, similarly to ECOWAS. We took note that there's a lot of inter-regional trade, and we needed to have a way of having a seamless kind of process in that way. The other aspect of the standards is to address micronutrient deficiencies, as we all know that these are some of the biggest challenges we have in the region. And here is just to highlight that the food vehicles that we have chosen are similarly to what is globally advocated for, but it was based on what is consumed by most of the member states: oil, salt, maize flour, and wheat flour. And we were also comparing as well with WHO standards and EXA standards, just to also guide and see that we're not far-fetched, but also taking consideration on the per capita consumption in the region, so that then they're more relevant for the region. So towards the end, I want to highlight that we are mindful that food fortification is one of the strategies to address micronutrient deficiencies. But as the regional economic community, what we've done is to develop other frameworks which member states are currently rolling out. And one such is action framework on improving the diets of young children. And in this action framework, which was adopted from the UNICEF guidance, it unpacks the role of each system: food system, social protection, WASH, and health in improving the diets of young children. And within the food systems, we have food fortification, biofortification as one of the key strategies that can help enhance improving the diets of young children, amongst other interventions. We've also taken note that whilst we create an enabling environment in terms of making sure that countries and member states develop their own regulations, we need to strengthen the social behavioral communication. And this was mainly to demystify some of the concerns on food fortification, but also to broadly advocate for consumption of dietary diversity or quality complementary foods. And we have now developed a regional SBCC strategy, which is accompanied by a toolkit for member states to adopt. Another opportunity for food fortification, as mentioned earlier, is through the school meals programs. And as a region, we've just recently been developing our regional school nutrition guidance. And here is also an opportunity for our school-age children that we don't miss them, and we indicate how we best can improve consumption of diversified diets, but also using fortified commodities as an opportunity. Hygiene strategy is one of the documents that we have also developed, and we are in a process of having regional recommendations for food-based dietary guidelines, with also inclusion of indigenous crops to be part of your normal diet at household level. Moving forward, what are the key lessons from the Sodec region? Firstly, for us, what we've learned is that regional coordination is key in moving forward the food fortification agenda, making sure that we are coordinated as a collective together with the partners, and making sure that no member state is left behind. I must say, we still have member states that we need to really accelerate momentum, like DRC as one of the member states, but we will continue engaging them. And one other lessons is that continuous partner engagement creates sort of buy-in, and we have engaged them throughout the process of developing the minimum standards, but also in supporting the member states. And partner engagements are both development partners, but also the food industry and your standard regulating bodies. They've been on board as we were engaging in developing the standards, but also capacitating the member states. I don't want to sound cliche, but we've also noted that financial and human resource investment is important. If you don't have a human body in an institution to coordinate these efforts, there won't be any movement. But that human body also needs, you need to have financial commitment, not only from development partners, but also from governments. And we've seen some of our government member states really committing Mauritius, there are some figures that they've committed already to putting forward the food fortification agenda amongst nutrition priorities. Last but not least is continuous engagement of member states as high as the highest level of leadership at ministerial level. On an annual basis, we give a report to the ministers of agriculture, to the ministers of health on the progress that we're making on nutrition overall, but also fortification agenda, so that then they can see the progress that we're making, but we're also advocating for more investment. With this being said, I would like to thank you, Dr. Adelaide, and back to you. I thank you.
Thank you very much for highlighting actually that when it comes to standards, that the working across frontiers, the member states, different member states coming together in those the interregional agreements are extremely important, because as we know, food does not stay within the same, does not respect the frontiers. So there is going to be, the more there is agreement among different member states, the better it is for that whole general region. You've also highlighted the fact that the necessity of working on complementary frameworks, so that this fortification is not seen in isolation from others, from other important initiatives that need to take place, so that we have a comprehensive look at what needs to be done in order to address malnutrition. We have a lot of questions, especially to Dr. Gay, regarding the bouillon cubes emphasis, and I'm not so sure if the overall chair would allow us to go through all of them. There's a couple of questions. There's one question for all speakers, but there's a lot of questions on the bouillon cubes. So I will be guided by Dr. Simplis. What shall we do? How much time do we have to for the discussion at this session? Dr. Simplis, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Onyango. We were to stop at 3:20. We still have 10-15 minutes.
Okay, great. So I think I'll start with the more generic question, and I'll request Dr. Arabi to respond to the question that was addressed to all speakers. And then I think it would be fair that Dr. Gay make some comments on the bouillon cubes. So Dr. Arabi, could you please help us answer this question, which was addressed to all speakers? Can you tell us about some country experience in the field of supporting private sector participation in food fortification? What's the experience there? So Dr. Arabi, I will request you to respond to that question. Over to you.
Thank you very much. It sounds like a very general question, but just maybe speaking a little bit about how we have approached it in our own work and in our programming. As I mentioned myself in my presentation, of course, the industry and the private sector are part of the system that needs to be coming together for making fortification successful. And, you know, we have engaged them as part of our kind of setting up the standards, in helping them set up the fortification facilities, and sometimes also with monitoring or improving the quality. So it's really depending on the needs of the country. Just wanted to mention perhaps one thing that we could share with the audience here, and I can put it in the chat, is what we call a blueprint for fortification that we just recently actually have released a version of it on our website, and also it's co-developed by the Food Fortification Initiative, FFI, that talks about the different stages and key elements of fortification. And in there you would see that the role of the private sector is also included, and then we have a tool. We have the toolkit that shows, you know, the different tools and resources that are available if, you know, countries or colleagues here are interested in getting into the details of some of the programmatic best practices that are currently available. So I think the best way would be for me then to add that as a resource for follow-up.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Arabi. And so Dr. Gay, there are several questions regarding the bouillon cubes. Some of those questions are saying, first of all, finding out, is there any reluctance on the part of communities to consume this? Why are bouillon cubes being consumed when they may be responsible for, responsible for cardiovascular conditions? Somebody has mentioned cancers. I think that's the bottom line question. Why this? And then I think we'll come back to an additional question on the use of alternative products. So could you please, Dr. Gay, comment on the bouillon cubes? Why, when they have this link, possible link with NCDs? Please, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Onyango, and thanks to the participant who has raised question about bouillon fortification. First of all, I want to start by giving some clarification about the choice of bouillon fortification. I think this is something people has discussed several years ago. And I think one of the main concern was, as I said, the relationship between bouillon consumption and some non-communicable diseases. And I think before starting the implementation of the work of this project, a convening has been organized in Dakar in June 2018. And I think this was an opportunity to gather all the stakeholders in the region to discuss how should we proceed to really put in place the good approach for the fortification of bouillon. And I think some recommendation has been made at that time. And this project has been developed based on those recommendations. And one of them was to put in place some country working groups at country level in order to synthesize all the questions relating to the utilization of bouillon as a food vehicle. And among those, after that, we have received what we call a research agenda in the 3 countries. And based on this request from the government and the private sector and the consumer association, we had some research, some evidence base, which needs to form a response from us to clarify what are the relationship, the supposed relationship between bouillon consumption and some diseases. What we are currently doing is to support the government at the region and the region to conduct this type of research to really demonstrate if there is any relationship between bouillon consumption and these diseases. This is ongoing, as I said. We have already done some research with IRIN Global Network, which was based on secondary data, which shows that bouillon is not the main contributor of salt intakes in the region. We can have household salt, and bread is providing more sodium compared to bouillon in the 3 countries. But now we want to conduct a more representative work, which will be based on what people are commonly consuming in terms of food that contain sodium. So this is why we are in preparation for a urinary sodium excretion, which will be associated with food intakes survey, which will be also an opportunity for us to do a modeling to try to identify if there is a link, a direct link between those diseases like hypertension, cancer, if there is a relationship with the rate of the level of consumption of bouillon in the region. I think we are working closely with the country working groups to identify what are the questions we should address before going deeply for the fortification of bouillon. And I think some question is related to the opportunity of this choice of bouillon as a food vehicle. I think because bouillon is widely consumed in the region, and I said also we are having partnership with some organization who will developing a technology. He will enable us to reduce the content, the salt contents of bouillon, and also to have a possibility for us to increase the capacity of micronutrient content of this bouillon. So I think this is the approach of this project, is to provide some response to the concern related to bouillon, the use of bouillon as a food vehicle in the region. And I think this is what we are doing. And I think at the end of this process, if you have evidence showing that this is not the case, I think the government will have the ability to set up, take decision based on this evidence.
Okay, I think from the WHO perspective, yes, one question is it contributing to NCDs or the overconsumption of salt? But another question is that is it efficacious? Is it actually, do we have any evidence that the consumption of bouillon cubes is actually going to reduce micronutrient deficiencies? Okay. So that is an aspect also of the evidence that we need to look at, and which is part of the reason why WHO does not have a guideline on this particular aspect of things. But of course, we have to look at the information that's coming in, and I believe that there's some studies that are being conducted that will contribute to that gathering of evidence. Plus, we are also, the concern from the WHO perspective will be if the producers of the fortified bouillon cubes then use that as a means for marketing, you know, something that makes it a product that is marketed as a health product rather than, you know, perhaps a vehicle to salt. Yeah. So we want to balance also those risks. Now, there's a final question which I suppose we could ask the panelists to respond to, and each I'll ask since Dr. Gay has spoken quite a bit. I'll put this question and ask Ponso and then Dr. Arabi to respond. What do you think about the fortification of moringa, nere, and other herbal foods that could also be looked into? What's your thinking about that? That's a question that's come from one of our participants. So over to you, Ponso, and then Dr. Arabi.
I'll give it a first step, and thanks for the question. For me personally, I'm of the view that if you have food commodities that already are micronutrient rich or nutrient rich, you wouldn't want to have additional nutrients added to them. That would be my initial thought, to say, and it also boils to the indigenous and neglected crops that I mentioned slightly, to say, let's have a repository of the foods that are commonly consumed or your traditional or herbal, and look at their nutrient content or micronutrient content. And if the micronutrient content is adequate, what we should be looking at is, you know, consumption, the consumption, and how do we create demand for that as part of diversifying consumption and dietary diversity. So that would be my initial thought, and I don't want to go deeper into that. But also looking at the principles of food fortification, you want to look at what vehicles are commonly consumed. So per capita consumption will also indicate whether we should go for large scale fortification for those, or we rather increase demand consumption as they are without necessarily fortifying them. That would be my initial thoughts. Thank you. Back to you.
Excellent. That also actually echoes what Namukolo mentioned, that there are indigenous foods that are quite rich in micronutrients. And so the consumption of those will be part of the bigger picture and the comprehensive approach to addressing micronutrient deficiencies. Dr. Arabi, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I also would like to just say that as I use this term optimal mix, increasingly we want to really see nutrition in a more holistic way, making sure that a really good, rich diet based on locally available foods is really something that we all advocate for. So definitely that's something that is part of nutrition programming. In addition to that, you know, what we are mostly talking about is here fortification of a relatively widely consumed stable at the national level, because this is the way you can establish those systems at the standards and quality across the board, and even comparability over time and comparability beyond the country itself. So while of course we want to be responsive to the demand and the kind of opportunities that exist within the country, it would be difficult to go with some of these kind of less explored specific food items in general, because we don't have those experiences. And the way you choose these staples, you usually choose a staple that's consumed in a relatively stable amount over time, so that you can actually achieve a stable intake over time. Because there's issues with safety, issues with too much intake or too little intake. Like there are a lot of those questions logistically that need to be answered before you go about mass fortification of a staple. And because of that, I think some of these food items probably would be difficult to explore, just because we don't have that data, and assuring safety and kind of stable standards over time would be difficult. And that's why those key staples that were listed are generally what I think the global fortification community is focusing on. Perhaps again, I mentioned rice being a new one, just because some of those qualities are being met. It is being more consumed, the consumption is being more stable in some of the countries. So it's started becoming a viable option, but still we need to explore and make sure it will be successful as a mass fortification vehicle. So I would say that basically the same standard, qualifications need to be applied to new vehicles if you want to start exploring them. Thank you.
Okay, there's a final question that came in, which is interesting, but I don't know if we'll have time to respond to it. And that's while promoting systematic fortification, what is done to monitor excess in some nutrients in the population? And I'm not sure that we have time to answer that question. If the instructions I got, we need to be wrapping that up. But this is a question which is in the chat, and therefore I trust that our colleagues at SEPTEMBRE are actually taking note of all the unanswered questions, and that there's going to be follow-up to this. So I'd like to hand it back to Dr. Simplis, and so that we don't detain the process on this very exciting session. Back to you, Dr. Simplis.
Thank you very much, Dr. Onyango, for this very interesting session and discussion. Thank you very much to the speakers. We really enjoy listening to the status of food fortification on the continent, on all the initiatives that have been going on, the challenges and the opportunities. I want to invite all the participants, after listening to this session, to use their chat box or the Q&A box to just share with us one or two things that they are taking as a message from this session. And if they have to make some recommendations on the way forward after listening to this session, what are these one or two recommendations that they want these high-level consultations to take tomorrow? So please use your chat box, use your Q&A box to share with us your takeaway messages, some recommendation that you may wish to see happening or being included in the final report of this consultation. So thank you again, Dr. Onyango.